So Fiona, people live in fear of audits, but sometimes it highlights some really good practices, and I gather that some of the stuff you've been doing was picked up as really good practice and worth sharing. Could you tell us a bit about what's been going on?
I was fortunate enough to be audited a couple of weeks ago, and in that audit there were two best practice audits. The audit was on the Cert 3 in Financial Services Indigenous Traineeship program, and the two best practice that were picked up was, one is that we've actually identified, or we identified a specific need for an Indigenous liaison officer, someone that was not necessarily a trainer but someone that could support them in issues besides training. And the other one was, we actually have 70 trainees across Victoria, so one person doesn't look after all of the trainees. There's about 6 of us that participate in the process, and maintaining a up-to-date contact register was proving to be slightly hard with so many people, so we actually implemented a spreadsheet that has every trainee on it, that's open to all the staff, and every time we have any contact or any visits, any phone calls, anything to do with the trainer, it's logged onto the contact sheet, and then when we need to just print it off and put it on file. So they're the two best practice that we're fortunate enough to get.
And some of the drivers for that, what made you identify those, I suppose, as issues? I can understand the complexity of people being around the state and trying to keep up with the log, but the support, the extra support you've been able to put in place for students?
The support for the Indigenous students was really important, in the fact that we weren't comfortable thinking that we could. We don't offer the support off campus, a lot of our support off campus, so we actually don't offer a person to go and help with literacy and numeracy off campus. It was always book a contact and they can come into Hawthorn, and that's actually very hard from someone in Mildura. So we didn't have those support systems in place for our off campus, and we still don't. And there are other issues in family issues and things that the industry that they're working in often didn't understand. So by actually identifying those and identifying that we needed a support officer that could go into industry and explain to them the difficulties that students have, and one of the big real issues that was highlighted to me is that we assume that kids can get onto the computers. One, they work in banks, so it's a restricted system, no internet. 2, none of them have computers at home. So that wipes out any systems that we want to do online or via a computer. So by bringing in someone that, and we chose the person very carefully, this person is an ex-trainee who now has a diploma of youth work. So he's been through the process. He's obviously Indigenous, he's young, and he just won Indigenous Student of the Year, Australian Indigenous Student of the Year. And he's actually there as more of a friendship. It's more of a friendship role, so that he can listen to what they have to say. He can tell his story, and I mean his story is a very big success story for him, and he actually was well rewarded monetarily for his awards. So he can give his story and just boost their confidence, and just provide that role that I don't think the trainers have time to do in our roles.
So what were some of the skills and abilities that you brought to the table to make that happen?
Sheer pushiness. I identified the need when we started, and we started these guys off probably about 18 months ago now, and it was just overwhelming. I'm as much as I love my job and love working with trainees, it's overwhelming. I couldn't do it. I can't do all the travelling. I can't be the be-all and end-all to everybody within the sector, and I don't necessarily always understand it. I mean, yes, I understand sorry time, and yes, I understand the cultural differences, but I am a teacher, and they see me as a teacher. I'm not there as a friend. I'm not there to, I'm having problems with my parents, although we do get a lot of that anyway. It's someone that they can actually relate to on their own wavelength, and from that we do get the funding to cover Indigenous students. So the decision was, Do we look at employing additional trainers? And I actually didn't think there was the need for that. I actually felt the need was more in that mentor support role for that additional funding, and that's where it came to. And management were really good about it. So.
Good. It's an interesting set of skills, being aware of the lack of skills.
Yes.
No, but that's what you're saying,
Yes.
is that the awareness of your boundaries, or of both the limits to your role, limits of your skill base, that said this was an important thing to put in
and
place.
a limit of time. I mean, we don't always have the time to do it. I would love to be able to sit and talk to my students on a one-to-one basis, but you're in and out, and they're so far away, and yeah, you just don't have the time.
So what would you like to do next? What would you like to
Where to from here? Besides increase the number of our Indigenous trainees, which we're actually doing, I'd actually like to see a mentor across all our students, not just Indigenous. I think that it's actually a really good model for particularly off-campus students.
And you've seen it impact on students?
Yeah, it's actually quite amusing, and it's funny because the Indigenous liaison officer is coming back going, they keep going, so what's it like working for Fiona? So it's actually interesting, but he's now getting phone calls. So if it's little things, they ring him now instead of me, which is fantastic from my point of view, because I'm not tied up with answering emails all the time and answering questions that take up 20 minutes here and have to do a bit of research. They're actually ringing Roy directly and saying, I'm not coping with this, or my mum's sick, and oh, do you know anything about scholarships? And so he's got all that information. So it's actually starting to take off, which is nice for me.
Thanks very much, Fiona.
No problems.
Very good.